Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's a great Monday morning here in the nation's capital. Thanks for tuning in. It's now 6:07. Check your watch. Check your coffee maker. Check your microwave. It's 6:07. Good morning, Bethany Mandel. It's Larry O'Connor on O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 7:05, Joe DeGeneva. At 7:35, Nick Minock. And at 8:05, Phil Wegman at Real Clear Politics. Speaking of Nick Minock, he's got a development here in this case. The murdered 41-year-old woman at a bus stop in Fairfax after she was stalked by an illegal immigrant named Abdul Jalloh, who had 40 prior arrests. And you'll remember Nick's last reporting result of a FOIA request. He got an email from officers in the Fairfax County Police Department warning Descano's office, do not let this guy out. We're arresting him on multiple aggravated assaults, and it's not a question of if, but when he strikes again. And he struck again, and he murdered a woman. And Steve Descano's office, as you know, has let this guy out, and he's not a standalone. This happens all the time with this guy. And then Nick Minock spoke with the office to try to get more details about the prior arrests.
Hey, it's Nick Minock with 7 News. When I reached out to Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney Steve Descano about why his office dropped so many charges against Abdul Jalloh, the illegal immigrant now accused of murdering a Virginia mother at a bus stop, Descano's office partly blamed the victims in his past cases. Descano's office said that victim testimony was crucial for a successful prosecution. Well, I spent some time at the Fairfax County Courthouse today. Here are some of the cases I've been looking at. I found in 3 separate cases. 2 were malicious wounding charges. Another was an assault and battery charge. I found that Descano's office did not subpoena the victim, and there's no record in the public case file of Descano's office even trying to reach out to the victims and Jalloh's past cases. Instead, in all 3 cases, Descano dropped them, allowing Jalloh to walk free. Now Mentor is murdered.
Unbelievable. A great reporting from Minock. So first you go to the prosecutor's office, Bethany, and say, why do you guys keep letting this guy out? And they blame the victims. Well, the victims don't want to testify. And then it turns out they never reached out to the victims to have them testify.
That's really terrifying. It's really terrifying. I've been talking to a family out in Michigan. The woman's mother was murdered. And she has been trying to get the prosecutor to care, and she can't even get them on the line. Yeah. They're not even charging this man with murder. It's
This seems to be a daily occurrence here in Fairfax County. Let's bring in our friend Sean Kennedy, Virginians for Safe Communities. And listen, Sean, you've been tracking this for a couple of years now. Any of this sound surprising to you, or is this sort of common behavior in Descano's office?
It's common behavior. What was different about this week, and I would say the last couple of weeks, obviously, with Gret Glyer, is there are 2 things going on. One, so many stories came out because, as you know, Jalloh was just the beginning. The next day, another homeless bus stop killing. The individual had just gotten out of federal prison and killed someone, and they dropped those charges because they claimed there was insufficient evidence and they couldn't prove it. But of course, that individual is representing himself, and he's a jailhouse lawyer, meaning Descano got beat on a murder case by a jailhouse lawyer prisoner. And then in the next day, a woman stabbed her own mother, and they dropped those charges again due to supposed insufficient evidence. And everything I've heard from inside sources are that the evidence was overwhelming, and they, once again, probably were so incompetent and lazy they couldn't make the case, and they dropped it. And those happened in sequence. But what's really happening underlying all this is that victims and people inside the system have gone further than ever before in bringing information to light that can be exposed like this. This stuff does happen all the time, but now it's sort of a domino effect where more and more information is coming out because people are like, this is crazy, and then, oh, I have something else that's crazy, and so forth and so on. So it's basically a pile on, which is a good thing, but it's cascading.
This is exactly what led to the recall of the district attorney in San Francisco, if you remember, also one of these Soros. I mean, even San Francisco had enough Can you answer a question? Because I want to get more details about this case, but just in the broad picture, is Descano now ineligible to be recalled again, or now that he's in a second term, can he face recall?
I spoke to Pat, obviously, before this. Pat Harity,
but Supervisor Pat Harity was on the show. We asked him about it, and he said, ask Sean Kennedy. He'll know.
Unfortunately, I know way too much about the Virginia recall law. There is not a specific bar on the second ones, but there's a series of bars about the number of days away from an election. So it has to be after an election by a certain number of days and before an election a certain number of days before triggering this and that and all. So it has rules around like limits, but it isn't like you can't keep doing it. There's nothing because the structure is very strange that you, unlike in California, go and get your signature certified for your ballot and language and everything certified by the Secretary of State. And then if you submit it accurately, you trigger an election. Not so simple here in Virginia. You have to submit it unvetted to the judge. The judge then vets it and decides if it's legitimate, both on substance or on the number of valid signatures. Then they have to appoint an outside Commonwealth's attorney because they can't prosecute themselves. In school board races, the local prosecutor prosecutes the recalls. Then, and I use the word prosecute because it literally goes to a jury trial, and you have to get a unanimous verdict at jury trial to trigger removal. And then the Democrats last time actually reformed the system to try to block this, and they fast-tracked it to the Supreme Court so the Supreme Court can eliminate the recall, can basically invalidate it with one stroke under the new thing. So there's a million checks that basically make it harder and harder to get a recall to go forward. And it's possible, but you need 30,000 signatures here in Fairfax County, and then they all have to be accurate and so forth. So they have to go trial and all that. It's complicated.
Got it.
Is there any way to reform this bonkers system? Because this bar is way too high.
Well, there's two issues here. One, obviously, my friend Steve Descano, I love him so. But unlike other than Steve, one thing that nobody pays attention to is how we select judges in Virginia. They're often selected by the local bar association, which, just like the national bar, are a bunch of radical crazies. And it's all patronage, family, friend stuff nowadays, at least. And I'll give you an example. While the Democrats controlled Richmond a few years ago, at the beginning of the Youngkin, the last thing, they appointed two circuit courts or two judges in that period, and both of them were Buddha Biberai's former law partners.
Oh, did we lose Sean? Yeah, we lost. That's fine.
You didn't lose me. I have background noise.
Oh, all right. Hold there because we have to stop for traffic. I want to get more. That is an absolute scandal and something that needs to be looked at as well. But I also want more details about what's going on in Descano's office right now and why they seem so intent on allowing murderers to walk free to murder again. Well, I mean, maybe Sean will shed some light on that. It seems unfathomable. 6:15. Continuing with Sean Kennedy, Virginians for Safe Communities, as we get the latest revelations over Steve Descano, the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, who first claimed that the reason Abdul Jalloh wasn't prosecuted for all of his arrests is that the victims never stepped forward, and now Nick Minnock has discovered that the victims were never subpoenaed or even notified that there were any hearings in the cases, and this is just standard operating procedure over there at Steve Descano's office, according to Sean Kennedy, Virginians for Safe Communities. Is this you mentioned incompetence? Is that what this is? Are these guys just bad and they don't know how to do their job, or is there something willful going on here? Is this Steve Descano either for his own purposes because he believes this, or because he's controlled by these political action committees funded by George Soros, just deciding that the only way to upend the racial injustices in our country is to allow murderers who are members of minority groups to walk free?
It's option E, all of the above. It is none. It is not one single answer. It is from decision to decision. It is a mix of incompetence, indifference, and ideology at every turn. So from the top down, they don't think mandatory minimums even though they're mandated by Virginia law to say if you commit an armed robbery, you have to do at least 5 years or whatnot. They have actual explicit policy saying rewrite the charges, drop the charges, make deals that don't do that. They are lazy, and every single case that goes to trial takes a lot of work, so they don't want to do that. And I have to say, I'm pretty sure that Gret Gleyer's case is a victim of that because they were so focused on the au pair murder because they got to be on TV, and so they couldn't do 2 trials at once. And it's a litany of things where we had an experience where one of the prosecutors in his office came public and went to Lindsay Watts at Fox 5 a few years ago, and he was in charge of sexual assault and child sex crimes cases. And he said, nobody trained me. They just handed me a bunch of cases with the most difficult issues and most vulnerable victims and said, do it. And he had just gotten out of law school. Like, he didn't know what he was doing. And they do this all the time. And so they both believe that they shouldn't punish people, and they just aren't good at punishing people. So it's hard to tell where it is. And of course, he knows the only people who are going to have his back after all of this is done are George Soros and the left-wing people. So he has to appeal to their ideology as ineffectively as he does. But he needs to do that in order to save his skin at the next election.
So where do things stand now in terms of, from your perspective, safety in the Commonwealth of Virginia, in the County of Fairfax and the Commonwealth Attorney's Office? Is this the only solution? Seems to me that people just either need to start demanding change, which, I don't know, like you said, there's more news now. Maybe it's going to start steamrolling, or people need to move out of Fairfax. Honestly, it's reached that point.
It's gotten very bad, and what I think is even more concerning about all of this is that it's a cascading negative effect in the context of victims and how people treat the public justice system. Because when people like the Gleyers or the families associated, in this case, the Minters and other victims' families, see the system work against them, they don't trust the system. So then other people in those circles and cycles, and us just watching TV, get jaded by seeing how the system abused people who are at their most vulnerable and need the most help. Then we turn against the system, don't have faith in it, don't participate, don't want to deal with the police, don't want to deal with prosecutors, and it goes on, and therefore they eroded the trust. They basically broke something with no intent on fixing it. And when we lose faith in those systems, then honestly, the next step is vigilantism. That's why our justice system works, is to prevent people from taking their own justice. And when people do things like this, it invites people to say, well, you're not going to get justice for me, so I'll get it myself. And that is a very dangerous, slippery slope we're on,
I'll say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How much of this is this sort of ideology of the left that, all punishment is racist? There was this crazy column that was written by Anna Krauthammer, I think it was in The Nation, about how she didn't want to report her rape because she didn't want her rapist to be imprisoned. It was a wild column. But I think it's an underlying ideology that they just think that everything is racist. How much of this is that?
Well, a lot. In this case, I can't say that it's racism as much as there's ideology where they believe that certain people, homeless, whatever, immigrants, whatever, deserve special treatment, special consideration. That could be also combined with race. I've definitely seen it from the inside working on the criminal justice board, where people will say things that are clearly code words for, we don't want disparate impact, some kind of perceived discrimination because there's more of this group or that group doing something. But at the same time, it's the whole ideology is that punishment is bad. It doesn't matter who you're punishing. Any punishment is bad, and any consequence is somehow inappropriate or whatever if we just pat them on the head. The number of people in Fairfax County who commit serious crimes, who get sent to what they call diversion or outpatient programs, who then never show up to those programs and there are no consequences, that's not compassion. That's cruelty. These people have problems. They have addictions. They have whatever. And you're not even enforcing the rules if they fail to get the treatment they deserve. It's a disservice even to the perpetrators in many instances.
Steve Descano is up for re-election in 2027, and I saw people commenting that, one of the reasons here is because Republicans never offered an alternative. First of all, even against a monster like Steve Descano, Republicans don't have a real good chance in Fairfax County. That said, if I remember right, in 2023, the strategy was to run somebody as an independent or to challenge him in the Democrat primary instead, right? That's why Republicans didn't really line up in the general.
Yeah, it's a for a Republican in Fairfax County, it's a suicide race. I mean, I think Abigail Spanberger got 75% of the vote. This is getting like the DC margins over here now. So you're not going to win on the Republican side unless, we have a Rudy Giuliani moment where, everybody in New York is so fed up with what's going on that they say, okay, I'll vote for the Republican. There are very few people like Pat Harity who can walk into anywhere in this county and basically people know who he is and like him, even if they don't agree with him. So unless you had somebody like that, the real game changer here is privately we know all these people who, you're mocking on air and all this other stuff about defending Steve Descano or whatever, like Scott Sorovel, even Spanberger or whatever. They hate Steve Descano. Steve Descano is an embarrassment. Abigail Spanberger, as much as they tried to turn this whole story against the ICE or whatever, she was not talking about what she wanted to talk about all week. She was talking about Jalloh. She was talking about Steve Descano. He's embarrassing her. He's wasting her time. They want him gone, but they're cowards because often they know that if Soros money gets involved, they could be on the wrong end of it. So they don't want to cross his donors, not Steve Descano. They have no respect for him, but they respect the people who backed him. So right now they're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
They respect the money.
They respect they fear the money.
Yeah.
And that's the problem here is that there are powerful interest groups behind Steve Descano that are also behind Sorovel and Spanberger and whatever, and they don't want to cross them, and they basically keep their mouth shut, or they try to turn it around. I mean, that was the funny thing in the House of Delegates floor the last couple of days in the state Senate was whenever these Democrats were asked about actually talking about Descano, they stuttered and were stammering around because they don't want to address the elephant in the room, so they're trying to turn it into how it's ICE's fault or whatever else.
Right, Trump's to blame. Yeah,
it's somehow Trump personally open the jail cell and pat him on the back. Yeah,
we got to leave it there. Sean Kennedy, Virginians for Safe Communities. Thanks for joining us. It's 6:25.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Good morning. It's 6:37. We've got a full show ahead of us here, and we're diving in face first. Coming up at 7:05, Joe DeGenova will be our guest. At 7:35, Nick Minnock just talked about that case in Fairfax County, and he's got the latest. And at 8:05, Phil Wegman, White House correspondent for Real Clear Politics, latest White House news. It's Larry O'Connor with Bethany Mandel. Good morning, Bethany.
Good morning, Larry O'Connor.
Here's the New York Magazine headline. It shows a woman, say maybe 30 years old, maybe a little more, looking confused, one hand on hip, the other clutching her head, either in frustration or annoyance, not sure. They tinted her in all blue to show that she's suffering from Great Depression. The headline is, "I regret having children." Subheadline is, "Women who wish they had chosen differently." By the way, the use of the word chosen is interesting there, considering the pro-abortion movement likes to use the word choice. So in other words, women who wish they'd chosen differently. Women who wish they had chosen to kill that baby before it could reach full term. Boy, oh boy. I'll just tee it off for you here, Bethany. Sooner or later, everyone has to decide whether to give up lazy weekends, disposable income, and overall peace of mind to have a baby instead. For many of those on the fence, one anxiety looms large. What if I make the wrong choice? Parent regret is more common than you might think. Bethany Mandel, the woman who brought us the mom wars, take it away.
I mean, this is exactly why I started the Mom Wars. Because this is a theme throughout popular culture and media right now, that motherhood is a burden, that it's exhausting, that it's draining. It's all negative. And I see it also on the right. And this is truly why I started the Mom Wars, because on the right, it's posed as this is a sacrifice. This is we're martyring ourselves, whereas it's just nice and it's fulfilling. I tweeted this headline with the caption, tough choice being on the receiving and giving end of the greatest love you've ever known, or waking up late.
Yeah.
It's not difficult. But the problem for those without children is that they don't understand what they're missing, and they have to take that leap. And that is a leap that you can't undo. You can't take backseat on becoming a parent. And in a way that you can take backseat on a marriage. You can take backseat on a job. There's everything that you can do. And these stories strike fear into the hearts of people who are on the fence, because this is their greatest fear, that they're going to do this and destroy the rest of their lives, because there's no return policy.
Yeah. If your life is defined by lazy weekends, and we mean overall peace of mind, by the way. I mean, yes, you don't necessarily have peace of mind because suddenly as a parent you're worrying about your child, but you're also responsible for another human life. Honestly, if people, Bridget Fedesi actually made a good point. Mm-hmm. She says, my feeling is that these women were miserable before they had kids. Now they have kids too. In fact, in many respects, I want everybody to have kids, except if this is your mindset about being a parent, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you're right, I suppose. I don't know. But I can tell you this. You look at that headline, you look at the picture, you look at the entire thesis, you know immediately how the person who wrote this voted. That this is the defining political divide in our country. People like to make it about race, ethnicity, gender, sex, whatever. No. The defining political divide in this country, when you really boil it down, is marriage and parenting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to push back on you a little bit, this idea that maybe these people shouldn't have kids. I think that there's a lot of immature people who have not been forced to grow up, and I blame our society for that, and I blame their parents on that. I went to high school. I went to several different high schools. One of them was in New York City, and I recently heard from a friend. I just turned 40 over the weekend, by the way.
Hey,
and
that's right. Happy birthday.
Thanks.
That's terrific.
And I heard a friend say recently that he's just not sure if he feels ready yet. And I'm like, Jeremy, dude, we're 40. At what point do you feel like you'll get there? Because the clock is ticking, and his wife is a year or two older. And so, I mean, I think the window is very quickly closing on their end. But my entire generation is in a state of arrested development. And this is a byproduct of that. And I think that a lot of them would be great parents. A lot of them would be very happy parents. But the problem is they've not been given a model. They've not been given, again, this is why I started the Mom Wars, they've not been given role models to say, this is fun and achievable and it will all work out. And they don't have positive messaging that tells them that, because all they see is this kind of doom and gloom.
Yeah, I do wonder though. Well, it's funny, is it that conservatives and people who have faith in their lives and who recognize the importance of sort of normative family structures and family units, are they conservative in the outset, and so that's why they have that point of view? Or when people get married and have children and realize the reality of parenting and the reality of the pressures on parents and challenging it is to be a parent in our society, does that turn them conservative? But either way, the numbers are there. If you're married and you have children, the odds are that you're more likely to be a conservative. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think having a child is a radicalizing reality check where you get mugged by reality, because you are suddenly like, oh, I care about all of these things that you didn't care about before. But I think also there's people who just don't put much thought into anything.
There you go.
Anything ever. It's a very shallow. It feels kind of dystopian these days. Everyone's on their cell phones. Everyone's just sort of a robot and going through the motions, and no one is thinking deeply anymore. No one's reading books and,
having children
things.
forces that. stuff, actually. And the other thing that I think it's easier to change your mind and say, oh, I was really wrong about all that stuff, when it's your children at stake and there are other lives at stake, and you could admit that you were misguided and you had different beliefs and different priorities and different values, because now your values have shifted and you can explain that and you're okay, and you have sort of freedom to be able to say, oh, I'm a parent now, I get it. Whereas if you don't, cross that Rubicon and change, because it does change your identity, spoiler alert, you are different when you become a parent. And then you can actually rationalize how you now look at the world in a different way. Without that big life-altering shift, well, then you have to admit you were wrong, but you don't have, a good impetus for it. You just, other than I was wrong. So either way, you're right. When all is said and done, even if you're a miserable human being, you should have children. That's my thought.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
It's 6:44. Aw, you love to see it when the hometown girl makes good, becomes an American hero, and then comes home. The city throws her a big parade down Main Street. That's what San Francisco did for EILEEN Gu, the Winter Olympics gold medal.
The one
Wait
who
a second.
competed for China?
She competed for a foreign country.
And San Francisco thinks it's good to compete for the communist regime?
Yeah.
I'm
apparently
shocked. This is my shocked voice, Larry. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but this is my shocked voice.
Well, to be fair, it was actually the Chinese New Year parade in San Francisco's famed Chinatown, and she was named as the Grand Marshal. So, I mean, I guess
the Grand Marshal
of the Chinese New Year parade. But
isn't that an honor?
Yeah, sure is.
Did they throw? Was it like a variation where they like threw tomatoes at her?
This is Gavin Newsom's California. This is Kamala Harris's California. I mean, no one in the room said, "Hey guys, she actually literally competed for our enemy, for China."
Do we have pictures of it? Oh, she wore all red. There it is. There it is.
Again,
makes sense.
That's a good luck for Chinese people. Not necessarily. I mean, the red was popular with Chinese people before the communist overthrow, but
yeah, but
sure,
yeah, she didn't.
It's
just,
hard.
It's not just her color.
Separate the two. Well, I mean, my ex-wife wore red at our wedding. So you change into my daughter too. You wear your white dress for your, a hat tip to the traditions on the West, and then you change into your red dress. Doesn't mean you're a commie if you're Chinese.
So one of my favorite tweets about it was ticker tape parades are for American heroes, not whatever the bleep this is. Yeah. But this is their hero. Yeah. Because in the Donald Trump regime, she pushed back against the regime in the most striking way she possibly could.
Yeah.
She defected.
Yeah.
But then not defected enough to spend more than 2 weeks representing, and now she's
because
back
the enemy is Trump. But they had a perfectly wonderful figure skater that they could have celebrated, whose father was a victim of the Tiananmen Square massacre and came here and fled for liberty and freedom, and they could have done that, but no, this was a deliberate choice. They're communists. It's who they are. It's 6:53.